Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. It's a beautiful, if chilly, fall day up here in the upper Midwest. Oh, we have so much to talk about. This week, Donald Trump set out to transform the White House, our house, into his palace. White House, White Palace. The Oval Office, the inner sanctum of the executive branch, after all, is now draped in gold leaf. The site of the former Rose Garden has been paved over, now dubbed the Rose Garden Club. It's a place without roses or a garden. But located, near the Oval Office, it's a convenient spot for Trump's oligarchs to gather while they wait for an audience. Now, one side of the old White House has been ripped down to make way for a grand ballroom where the fortunate few can dine in splendor and pay court. Pay court. Building a palace in Washington will save Mr. Trump the embarrassment he feels when he visits Buckingham or Elysee Palace. It will ease his jealousy when he thinks about his friend Putin in the Kremlin. And Americans not named Trump, we're proud that our government looks and feels more like a popular government than a monarchical one. Americans in the founding generation didn't fail to build a palace. They chose not to build a palace. Americans ever since have benefited from that choice. The White House is a respectable home for our president and the central office of a democratic government. George Washington designed the Oval Office, well, its predecessor, so that no one would be forced into a corner, so that hierarchies of rank weren't built into gatherings in the space. Trump's golden ballroom is the architectural repudiation of those egalitarian ideals. We don't need a palace. The wrecking ball came for the White House. At the same time, of course, it came for the Treasury, our Treasury, because this week Trump declared it's time for taxpayers to give him a $230 million tip. He says it's to pay for the pain and suffering caused by the investigation into his theft of national security documents. It isn't. He just thinks that since he controls the Justice Department, that department should okay a settlement that gives Trump, as president, personal use of the nation's treasury. And because Congress is missing and the Supreme Court is in the tank, he's already ignored the funding laws, impounding spending he doesn't like. Or, if he wants, spending where there's no authorization. It's as if our treasury is his personal wealth, like in a kingdom. And we've already seen it. He spent almost $1 billion to refurbish a Qatari jet for his personal use. Doesn't spend anything to help California recover from wildfires. Spends whatever it takes to get rid of Mexican immigrants in the country. Spends nothing to extend health care subsidies for Americans. All by all means, and now take nearly $250 million just because. None of this authorized by the Congress of the United States. And look, just because just because despicable John Roberts says Trump can't be held accountable doesn't mean it's not all criminal. And now the criminal in chief wants his own palace? One that sends the message to Americans, you work for the government doesn't work for you. And if you don't like it, well, look, here's what he's already done to people who disagree with him. You can be indicted on trumped-up charges. You can get doxxed by his paramilitary followers. Your children can be threatened. And if there are enough of you, your city can be invaded by the Department of Homeland Security. And if Trump gets his way in court, your city can be invaded by the U.S. military as well. All that All that is going on here in my city of Chicago. It's going on as we speak in neighborhoods around this city. Trump's undertrained and overarmed thugs continue to terrorize neighborhoods and threaten reporters. This week, yesterday, I stood with terrified parents outside a school. ICE had just done a drive-by, and that's all. They didn't make an arrest. They didn't even try. It was a show of force intended to frighten people. In other neighborhoods, ICE teams are grabbing people out of cars. They're tossing tear gas canisters in the streets as they drive away in violation of court orders. Chicagoans are documenting all of this. Chicagoans are standing up to all of this. Chicagoans are standing up for America right now. On cue, of course, as we document this, anonymous MAGA, what do I call them, terrorists, doxed a Tribune reporter simply for reporting on ICE activity. They posted his address and talked about his kids. Seriously? All of this is brought to our city, to America's cities, by Mr. Trump's Department of Homeland Security, led by Kristi Noem. Now, Noem doesn't have a palace like Trump, but she did use taxpayer money to buy 2 Gulfstream private jets so she can fly around in her never-ending battle to secure good video of her overseeing the separation of children from their parents. Why 2 jets? I don't know. Is one for her and the other for hair and makeup? Who knows? Doesn't matter. Trump's okay with it, so the government spends the money, right? Because it doesn't need Congress. Her money. His money. Do what you want with it. Not our money anymore. You just paid your taxes. He can decide, right? And the Republicans in Congress can't be bothered to show up. They just declared another week off. My friends, Mr. Trump and his gang think we will hate each other more than we love this country. He is so wrong. He is so wrong. In this city, people are crossing all kinds of, it is a pretty divided and segregated city still, Chicago, and people are crossing all kinds of boundaries to help each other. Though the whole might of the U.S. government has been commandeered by this guy's, we are stronger. And in the coming weeks in New Jersey and in Virginia, Trump is going to feel the first tremor of a free people refusing to bow down. And in the months after that, he is going to feel the full, unstoppable force of a free nation as it reclaims its birthright. His palace, please. Her private jets, please. The attacks on innocent people in our streets, tear gassing neighborhoods just because. It's disgusting. No, sorry, Mr. Trump, government of the people, by the people, and for the people will not perish from this earth, but your presidency will. I got a great show for you. We'll be right back with Chris Armitage. Don't go away.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we're back, and I'm joined by Christopher Armitage. He's an Air Force veteran, an author, and a man whose curiosity has guided his own research into areas as diverse as human trafficking and disaster preparedness, and whether the worst impacts of the Citizens United decision might be blunted by state corporate laws. He's just an interesting guy. His Substack what do you call it on Substack? A publication is called The Existential Republic, and it's grown really amazingly. And it's grown because it's good. He's a good writer. He writes about things that matter. And like every one of you listening, he sees the direction we are going, and he is not amused. Chris, welcome.
Hey, I'm happy to have you on the show. I appreciate you having me.
No, I'm glad. And I like your site a lot. I think you write about interesting things, and you write so well. It's just a pleasure to read.
Yeah, well, it feels about as good to be read.
Yeah.
I've spent plenty of time reading things that not many folks read as I worked on the craft of writing, because that's so much. I've always loved learning, and I've never been great at shutting up. But once I learned how to be able to package that and share it with people in a way that they responded to, things transformed pretty radically.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that site took off. That must have been a rocket ride for you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I saw like, some of the people who were following me all of a sudden and even like became paid subscribers and reached out. And it's, you know what, though? I remember, there's some people who are like, where'd you come from or this or that. And I'm like, I've been plugging away for years, ran for Congress a few years ago as a lefty in a big, deep red district, and been writing books and learning and even doing some great research at different points. I did a study about deception detection abilities among law enforcement officers that was really fascinating. And now I've just ended up in this place where I get to bring some surprise, some unique perspectives together, and especially coming from law enforcement and national security and getting to speak to, human rights from that perspective.
Yeah. It's very important. Yeah. I mean, and it's a bridge that America needs, oh my gosh. And right now, where we have law enforcement in the guise of ICE violating human rights on block after block of my city, it's enormously important.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some of the things. Oh, go ahead. We have time. But I want to talk about some of the things you've written about. I mean, many of us have said that Donald Trump is coming for our elections. And now, we see that happening. The DOJ announced this week that they will monitor polling sites in California and New Jersey ahead of the November 4th election. And they listed 6 counties that, the New York Times and others said, oh, yeah, they're going to be there and they're going to monitor elections. Like that's a normal thing that we've done in the past, except this really isn't that. Because what they said is they're setting up between now and then, and they will be available, this is a quote, to receive questions and complaints from the public related to possible violations of federal voting rights laws. Now, that's in the months before an election, and all of that just feels January 6th-y to me.
Yeah. Well, if there's anyone who knows, I'm originally from New Jersey, and everybody from New York and New Jersey knows about how much Donald Trump rips people off. He was in the bed with the mob, all these things. There is no doubt among anybody who's looking at this situation honestly that he will do anything and everything he can do to prevent a free and fair election and to guarantee every election going in the direction he wants it to go, cementing one-party Republican rule. I mean, it really feels like it would be foolish to expect anything less than that from this man, except now we have we have had the purge of the federal government. It happened already. It's loyalists. It's people who will bend the knee. That's what's left. So there isn't, a Department of Justice that's going to be anything but an attack dog that he can sick on people. SCOTUS is going to support him on anything he does. We have had a full capture of our federal government. Now it's up to how many state level leaders are going to be willing to ruffle feathers, are going to be willing to take steps that it's Calvin ball. You don't get to win Calvin ball by playing Calvin ball. They're going to change the rules to be whatever they want them to be.
Yeah, this last week, a group called the Steady State, which is made up of former national security, CIA, people who worked on Capitol Hill, folks who spend their time looking at other countries to see how they're doing on democracy, issued a report about us. And it's absolutely terrifying. And it says what you are saying, that Democratic backsliding in the U.S. is accelerating, characterized by a consolidation of executive power, erosion of institutional checks and balances, and deliberately weakening of civil service protections and oversight mechanisms. They got the federal government, absolutely weaponized it entirely. And they are working on rhetorically hiding that, so somehow making that that's normal and the rest of us aren't, and which just couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. Well, and the way that the media has been captured is probably the biggest thing cementing all of this. There is a complete. I know people have talked about how Fox News, they were labeled as entertainment rather than media, and that got them around different things. No, you don't get to just, if you're in a movie theater and you shout fire, you can't just say, I'm an entertainer. And that's not a valid excuse in a court of law. And so, man,
they got away with
bad faith actors who are absolutely, and they shouldn't have been, and we need to take them to task. And it's going to result in negative. We're not going to be able to just have everybody get along all the time and prevent any stressful situation. We're not. It's just not how you get out of these situations with autocracy. There's going to have to be confrontation, and that confrontation can be state-level attorney generals charging disinformation actors who are being paid by foreign governments to disrupt our nation, as proven in courts of law in the United States. Charge them for those crimes. Put them in a jail cell. That's what has to happen. We cannot have a captured information environment, because there is this error that people are making, where they presume that if things get bad enough, people will wake up. There is nothing inherently about suffering that brings us closer to the truth. Under Stalin, there were people resorting to cannibalism. Family members would starve to death, and the rest of the family would eat them. That's horrific, right? So you would think that's about as bad as it can get. So everybody must have known how bad Stalin was. Well, no. There was research showing sizable portions, sizable minorities, around a third of people in the USSR at least, blames the United States because that's who Stalin told them to blame.
Yeah. Well, so
that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. I'm a little less frightened about the media than you on this, in part because, first of all, I agree with you that right-wing consolidation and their complicity with Russian and other propaganda campaigns to divide us are enormously disruptive and painful. But 30% means something different still in America. And I think reality is setting in. I mean, Trump's poll numbers are tanking. The numbers of people willing to come out and protest are higher. Economic troubles, troops on our street, the demolition of the White House. Even the most skilled propagandists can't hide this in the media ecosystem in America, because it's unlike Stalin's. It's not. There's a lot of right-wing propaganda for sure, but if people want to find truth, if they want to find your writing, they can. If they want to find other points of view, they still can. They haven't managed to snuff that out, and I take some comfort in that, and in comfort in the continuing collapse of his public support.
Yeah, well, it's tough to call it a collapse because, I was just actually, it's unfortunate, Newsweek is one of the worst offenders about this, because they'll see the same poll and they'll post in the morning, Trump is being destroyed, and then in polling, and then in the afternoon, the same poll, they'll say Trump is doing great. The most recent polling I've seen from reputable sources has Trump's approval rating at an 88% among Republicans. Now, he is faltering among independents more, but even beyond that, let's say people wake up out of information environments, which I'll also say, though, as a former law enforcement officer, I still got a lot of friends in that community. And I encourage people to go out there. Why don't you contact the Trump supporters and ask them? And when I do that, what I hear is, Doge did a great job, and we got to get rid of these immigrants. And I do not hear that anecdotally, and I don't think that that's what polling is showing. As far as there's more angry people who didn't like him already are getting angrier and are getting more active. But also, so much of modern American conservatism is an identity. It's an ecosystem. They're listening to the same media outlets. They're consuming that information, and it shapes their reality. On a deep level, we don't believe. Most humans don't believe what we see. We see what we believe, and that is still very widespread. But I don't want to play doomsayer about that. I want to let's say you're right, and people are coalescing against him and seeing that things are bad and they're ready to act, which, of course, No King's a great example. We still have at least a dozen states in the United States that are operating as autocratic single-party regimes, because when you make sure that large swaths of your population, cities with millions of people, have 8 ballot drop boxes rather than hundreds, and you do everything, you literally throw ballots that are uncounted out, like we know happened without consequence in Texas, when those things are happening, that's already Russia stuff. That's there. So we have all these
Jim Crow
states
stuff,
where there's,
for sure. It's Jim Crow stuff in a modern way, and they're using it. I mean, we have experience in America and messing up democracy on purpose, and I agree with you that we have. In my head, they're two separate conversations. How do we improve the democracy, for sure, but how do we keep it from disappearing entirely? Is a not quite the same question. You recently sort of wrote about where America fits on the continuum from democracy to dictatorship, and you looked at a lot of the scholarly and evidence about that. But I guess let's take a minute and talk about what you found and where we are.
Sure. We're in the early stages of autocratic control where it hasn't fully coalesced. It can still be pushed back against. And this is scholars who do amazing work. I'm so grateful for the political scientists out there, and Erica Chenoweth and work like that that's being done to look into this. We're on the early stage now. We're able to look at other countries that were in similar positions. We have this great distributed system in the United States. We have so much power among the states. This gives us some unique tools to fight back. But it's estimated somewhere between 2 to 10 years is how long it'll take for it all to fully coalesce. It looks like we're headed more towards a hungry, illiberal democracy where elections happen and sometimes the people you like win. But there's so much of an institutional tilt that it's insurmountable. I mean, the Texas Attorney General admitted himself that the Democrats would have already flipped that state. Now they're working in an environment where they're more free from consequence to rig elections in red states.
Yeah, courtesy of John Roberts. Yep.
Absolutely. So, that's where we are in the continuum right now.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, you also said that what's required to fix it is sustained civil society mobilization. And I think I agree with that too. Absolutely agree with that too. I do think we aren't strangers to that in our country. I actually think that's the only way we've ever really made progress with that kind of effort. It's what got us the 5-day work week because labor organized around the country. It's what brought an end to Jim Crow. It's what enfranchised women. Mm-hmm. And those were left-leaning victories. And then the left thought, well, we've won, and they got lazy. And the right then engaged in sustained mobilization, which is what got they've done it since the ERA fight in the 70s. They mobilized in churches, and that, I think, brought an end to the right to abortion in America. So I don't think it's uncommon. I just think that pro-democracy, liberalization forces got lazy and outsourced their work to lawyers. But I think no kings, and maybe I don't want to get your view on this, that we are beginning to learn how to mobilize again at these giant levels that are going to be needed to push back.
So I completely agree with you. I mean, but one of the big things I'm trying to explain to people is, it's not just about getting 3.5% out in the streets for, if you don't do anything with a march, it's essentially a parade. It needs to be building towards the levers that influence people's behavior. We don't have time to elect new swaths of politicians on every level. There is not time for that. But I don't think that's the most effective strategy anyway. Humans generally conform to the shape of their vessel. I mean, I'll tell you something about myself. I was a different person a lot of times when I was working in law enforcement. When I was a substitute teacher, I was a little bit of a different person. When I was a wrestling coach, we humans conform to the shape of our vessels. That's just a thing about us. Very few people have like a wildly or an incredibly stable set of behaviors across all things. That is a rare, exceptional human. And so,
and we call those people rigid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you should adapt to your environment.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's healthy.
Yes.
And so politicians, being humans, are influenceable by behavior, by a lot of what I'm advocating for right now is figuring out how to get politicians to do the things that we want them to do. How do you get them to listen to you? How do you get them to support the policies that you actually want to support? My favorite tactic, and please, I want everybody possible to steal this, talk about it, share it, is most states and at the federal level, you can look up everyone who's ever donated money to that politician. You can look up how much they donated. You can look up their phone number, their email address, their name, their employment. You can contact them. It is legal. It is your First Amendment right. Don't let anybody tell you it isn't. Now, you're not allowed to tell them to vote for someone else, and you're not allowed to raise money from them. You are allowed to call them and say, hey, you're a Republican representative or you're a Democrat representative. You know they did X, Y, or Z? How do you feel about that? You gave them $6,000. Is that what you want your money going towards? You can ask those questions. Now, you do that for everybody who's done a max donation, for your city, everyone from your city council member to your, sheriff, to your U.S. House representative, to your senator. You do that enough times. Well, let me tell you, they answer those phone calls. When somebody who's donated, $250,000 to Lindsey Graham over the last 20 years, when that person calls him, he answers. You do that with enough people. You send them letters to their house. You get other people to do it too, and you stay persistent. Well, now this person who won't answer your phone calls, they're going to know your name. I promise you they will. And they're going to take what you're saying seriously, because even if all their donors hate your guts and agree with Ted, well, they sure as heck don't like getting these phone calls. They don't like getting public attention on them. They don't like being seen. And that's what we can do, is we can shine the spotlight on the people who are funding authoritarianism. And that's a fun one, the businesses and the people that are funding it.
You've talked a lot about that. And we can't get at the dark money that has been unleashed by Citizens United, because we don't know that. But still, there's a lot of money that is visible that people can go after. And I want to be really clear. You are not telling anybody to go dox somebody the way the right wing is doxing reporters and others on the left.
No.
You're not saying, right? And under no circumstances are we saying, tell somebody where their children live. That's not what we do. But you can write to anybody and say, seriously, I have a better use for that $250,000. Instead of spending it to destroy a neighborhood in Chicago, instead of spending it to wreck the environment, instead of spending it just because it gets you a seat in the new ballroom, how about doing something and you name it. These are perfectly legitimate and decent things to do.
Absolutely. Always to start out, honey gets you farther than vinegar. And I think it's really important that, we try to have good faith conversations with people and bring the facts, and really show them like, hey, this is like irrefutable here. This is when this vote happened. And I just want, you don't want working class people to make more money here? Your representative voted against raising the minimum wage. So is that how you feel? And get them on a few different. Well, so you're donating to someone who said publicly that it's okay for our Fourth Amendment rights to be destroyed. Now, I know you support the Second Amendment, but do you not care for the Fourth? Because you have U.S. citizens who are getting, it's warrantless that they're being abducted and taken away somewhere.
Yes.
I hope you don't get too much of a tan this weekend, 4th of July weekend, because the Roberts Supreme Court said that now your Fourth Amendment's gone if you have a bit of a tan, because racial profiling is legal now. How do you feel about that? You don't care for you only like the one constitutional amendment. It pushed people on it, but of course we can't be out here threatening people's safety and that kind of stuff.
Let's just be so people who are listening. You might be wondering, you know what? None of these billionaires are going to take my call, but there's an address written that on every one of these disclosures you can send a letter to. Absolutely every one of them.
And even, start at the top of the list, but work your way down. You want to go grab your indivisible group, get something to do? Every Saturday, meet up. You do, 5 letters each to top 100 donors for X, Y, or Z representative with a specific demand. And then you all call those donors as well, and maybe send them an email as well. If they don't, do following up each week, kind of using cold calling principles or cold contact sales principles. Like, okay, this week we're doing the letters. Next week we'll do the phone calls. We'll track who followed up with what. And you might be able to turn some of those donors. That politician you might be able to tell that politician, hey, all these people who donated to you last time, they're going to be looking for somebody else to donate to next election because we see you. The public has never been more dissatisfied with their representatives than in the modern era. And yet representatives get reelected at a higher and higher rate. And what a fascinating situation that as we've slipped into tyranny, that has been the trend, right? So clearly, if we can restore the congruity between public belief about public policy, what we want to see happen, if we can get back there, then it would follow that things will get better. I saw this study from Princeton that said that in the 1960s, when the public's views on different policies pretty much matched how Congress voted. And those two lines have just gone further and further away from each other in the 50, 60 years since then.
Well, right. And, but Congress has been very true to one thing. They deliver for who they work for. And back in the 60s, they worked for the people who elected them. But they worked for the people who elected. That still left a lot of people out because we had Jim Crow in the 60s. But they worked for the people who elected them. Now, courtesy again of the Supreme Court, they work for the people who draw the maps and who give the money. And and the outcomes are different. Congress is delivering for the people who draw the maps and give them money. But that's not delivering for the American people.
Right now, we have illegitimate federal government. And I think you could argue we've had an illegitimate federal government since the year 2000, when the Supreme Court decided a presidential election.
And this bears saying. In Bush v. Gore, they decided the presidential election by saying you cannot count the votes in the rest of Florida. Time's run out. We just cannot recount these votes. We're only going to recount the ones in this county. So they decided the election by saying we're not counting American votes. And that was a terrible decision.
And they all should have been fired. If you're going to stop Americans from casting their legal votes, you should be in a jail cell. And
counting when I talked about casted, they cast them. They just refused to count them. Yeah.
Even worse, even more egregious. And if we can start living our principles, living our values, things will get better. The fact is that the zealots have been fighting hard, and they've been doing it for a long time. The anti-choice people who've wanted to outlaw abortion for all causes, they never stopped fighting. Even after the Supreme Court made its ruling, they fought and fought and fought and fought, and they did not care about anything above their morals and values. We cannot value the rule of law more than we value the rule of justice. That is crucial because law has been weaponized against us now.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have that. A definition of rule of law. I think they're acting lawlessly, but yeah, I agree with you. We need to keep justice. Law without justice is a terrible thing. So Chris, I hear from people, and I'm sure you do too, who say that we are overwrought. That look, the pendulum swings, and they've overreacted. And now it's going to swing back, and I listen to these people who have risen above the fray that you and I are in, and they talk about this like it's just a normal pendulum swing and we shouldn't worry so much, even though what the Trump administration is doing is terrible. The arc of history is always going to the good side. How do you answer folks who, aren't fully in the fray yet, even though they know they don't like Donald Trump, but they assume it's just a pendulum swing?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting reality some folks get to live in. It would be great if we could just feel that, if that could just be the case. But, we could defer to the experts, the people who study this for a living, and say, hey, we have large swaths of the country with massive levels of voter disenfranchisement where there aren't consequences for people being or for not counting ballots that have been cast because of where they were cast, or reducing the number of polling locations, or dropping ballot drop boxes from almost 100 down to less than 10 in cities with millions of people, like happened in Dallas. That's not democracy. And that's the progress that we're making. That's the process that's happening, is the factual destruction of democracy, the structures and the levers that create it. This isn't policy differences. When we see the Supreme Court of the United States saying the president can do whatever they want as long as it's an official act, and you are not legally allowed to investigate whether an act is illegal or not, that is putting the president above the law, without a doubt.
Absolutely did that.
Yes. And so we now have a presidency. The unitary executive theory is what the Supreme Court, more than half the members have explicitly endorsed. It turns the president into a king. That's not hyperbole. It's factual. It says the president of the United States is above the law. If the president does it, it is legal. These people are still upset about Nixon, and they never stopped being upset about Nixon. So we don't have free and fair elections. We have one party out of the two that is completely acting in a lawless manner without recourse. They are now weaponizing our justice system to attack political enemies. They're demonizing large swaths of people. The Constitution doesn't come back from being destroyed. The Fourth Amendment's cooked. Even the Second Amendment is. Because they'll weaponize it against you. They'll come after you. They're doing everything they can. It's not just guns for anyone who wants them. Every single part of our Constitution has been under attack, including the 22nd Amendment, because Donald Trump is in the White House showing off his Trump 2028 merch. You don't recover from that. There isn't a pendulum swing back from the complete destruction of all the norms that were holding up our political and electoral system. We're fighting against people who have made it clear that they want single-party rule. They do not want freedom. They do not want justice. This is not politics as usual, and the United States will never, ever be the same again.
Well, Chris, you're not saying we can't beat them back, though, are you? You're saying it takes an effort, a huge effort, for sure. But are you saying
the Democrats would need a 20%? There's fights we can win, but at the federal level, mathematically speaking, the Democrats would need about a 20% win at the national level. It would need to be a wave of an unprecedented level. But here's the problem. Let's say Louisiana, Texas, Florida, they have this huge wave. Well, what do you do when there's only 8 ballot drop boxes in Dallas during that wave? Maybe all the rural counties start waking up. Well, Trump still has his 88% approval rating above Republicans. That's in the last 30 days. I haven't seen a compelling case to be made that the federal government of the United States can be saved. I think the state governments have an awesome opportunity. This is an incredible time for state governments to create parallel institutions and to provide things to their residents that have been ignored by the federal government for a long time.
Yeah.
But the federal government, I just can't see I haven't heard a compelling case for how we can pull out of this when the Supreme Court's made it clear. The difference between an official action and an unofficial action by the President of the United States is whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. We can really clearly see in how they ruled against Biden and Obama versus Trump. The Department of Justice, the purge.
What they've said is that distinction is up to them to make. They've taken the power to themselves and said, we get to decide this. And we're not even going to give clear guidance. When it comes up, you just call us and we'll tell you. which is, I think, maddening and power grab by that court, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is it over? Oh, go ahead.
I guess what I'm going to ask you but given the tenor of this conversation, it might be obvious, but I want to ask it anyway, because here in Chicago, we are facing escalating federal violence and provocation. Honestly, untrained, ill-prepared ICE troops thinking they're trying to do what they've been asked to do and terrified of a city that shouts at them every time they show up, tells them to go away. And I am proud of everybody standing up and shouting at them and chasing them away. But as they run away, they throw tear gas canisters at people. I mean, they're in no jeopardy from the public. There's not a insurrection here. But we're not letting our neighbors and friends be picked off the street without a fight. And yet, escalating violence, escalating incitement by these people. Commerce is way down. It's cost us a fortune. People are afraid to leave their homes. I'm looking at all of this aggression, and I am thinking it's all about, because it isn't serving the purpose of capturing anybody. I just think they want to try and incite us to behave in a way that would give them some justification to go to court and ask for further military presence. And if they don't get it, I guess there's an insurrection act. Do you think they would go there?
Well, I think at this point, I don't know what anyone thinks would stop Donald Trump from doing whatever he wants to do. I'd ask you that. Do you think there's anything that really?
Here's what I think.
He said his full attention is on the ballroom.
Yeah, I know. He will do what he wants to do. I do not believe, and I keep asking people. I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'll tell you what I think first. I do not believe that we will have a Tiananmen Square incident in the United States. I do not believe, no matter what the government orders, U.S. troops will fire on American protesters. I just don't believe that.
I mean, it happened before, though. Multiple times in U.S. history, U.S. troops, Ohio, Neil Young, one of my favorite songs. It's happened.
About Kent State. Yeah. I don't think, I'm not saying that people won't, that accidentally scared, untrained troops won't fire and kill somebody. I think that is on the offing. But the kind of organized, we are going to order the mowing down of people. Those National Guard people weren't ordered to kill people at Kent State. I think the only time U.S. troops were ordered to shoot Americans was a labor strike at Blair Mountain, and then the coal miners. So I don't think we have a big history of that, and even if ordered, I just don't think they will do it. Do you? No. I mean, that would be pretty frightening.
I'll tell you, I served for almost a decade in the U.S. Air Force. Mm-hmm. I was military police, deployed twice, and I think it depends on who you send. Honestly, as dark as that sounds, if you send the Marines, they're going to mow people down. I'm absolutely certain of that. Most of the Army, they live in a different reality. I'm telling you, I can go grab beers with a bunch of buddies down at the VFW. They love Trump. They think he's doing an amazing job. When I was a corrections officer, there was a retared police officer there. Now, this isn't military, but there was a retired police officer who was on a second career as a corrections officer. He told me, he was bragging about this huge Trump flag he had in his front yard, and he was saying he would literally go to Washington, D.C. with a gun and lay down his life for Trump. That was before the election even. Mm. The military is filled with people like that. I know them. I can sit down and have a good time hanging out with them. But they live in a different reality, and in that reality, Antifa has taken over your home. And they got to do what they got to do, and Trump is never wrong.
Well, I hope you are. I don't know. That's a very frightening. That is a very frightening vision, Chris. Wow. I mean, Because I agree with you. I won't put anything past Trump. He would not be. I mean, he's already asked if they could shoot protesters in the legs. So I agree. I put nothing past them.
Look what we did in Vietnam. Look at we do bad. The United States has done bad things all over the world. And human courage exists. It absolutely does. Mm-hmm. But like I said earlier, humans conform to the shape of our vessels.
It doesn't exist in Congress, in the Republican Congress. Yeah. I mean, where are they, Chris? Like, they're taking another week off, I hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Where are they? That's a good question.
I think we should offer
their jobs.
It's a reward for anybody who confines the Republican Congress. Hello? Yeah. We need you. Come on back to work, fellas.
Well, I think it's the job of a lot of us to make their lives kind of suck in a legal way, like not breaking any laws. But it should really be terrible to be betraying your country. Your life should not be good. You shouldn't be able to use social media because everybody is going to come at you and talk about what you're doing. And you go out to a restaurant, people are going to recognize you, and they're going to want to ask you. They're going to have some words about what you're doing to this nation and to our future and to the future of humanity and your betrayal of your oath and what the people need. And you should be taken to task every single day. And what is it they say? If you want a friend in D.C., get a dog. First of all, I'm not going to criticize the people fighting the fascists. I'm grateful for the Democratic Party and for the work that they're doing because they are the opposition that we have.
Yep.
But I'll just also say that nobody in elected office is our friend. All of them have a job to do, and we will demand that they do that job. That's our job. And if we do that, if enough of us step up, that's the thing. A lot of the things I've said, maybe rightfully, they've made people hey, you're saying we're cooked, we're done. We have so much power, more than you or me. We have so much power. Humans, people, the citizens, the public. Those numbers are powerful. Thousands of people acting. The No King's Days protest. Every day people message me and they say, are you talking to Governor Newsom? Are you talking to, Governor Pritzker? Are you talking to, I'm a few degrees of separation from these people, but you probably know what I know about people in the halls of power in elected office. What gets them to act? Donations being influenced, votes being influenced, and the public discourse relates to both of those. If they become politically toxic because of the decisions that they are making or are not making, that will influence their behavior heavily. And if they're not raising money, or it's very clear that they're not going to raise a cent next election, that's going to influence their behavior. So a good idea won't change even the best politician's mind as effectively as something that's going to influence votes or money.
Yeah, and while we're doing that, we have to continue to build civil society and strengthen it. Because that also is a bulwark against tyranny. And they try and damage civil society in all kinds of ways. I want to shout out again to my fellow Chicagoans who are going out of their way to help each other, but Chris, you talked about elected leaders. I am seeing in this crisis, first off, the elected leaders are doing fine. I mean, particularly the Democratic elected leaders, from the governor in my state to Chicago aldermen, who don't usually get a lot of praise, are out there protecting people and doing what they can. But the opportunities for leadership are so many that ordinary citizens are stepping up and leading. They're organizing drives to bring food to people who won't leave their house because they're afraid. They're organizing drives to watch the children as they leave school to make sure they can get home safely. They're organizing to go watch ice and let people know where they are. They're doing things. People are taking leadership, not waiting for somebody elected to do it, although the electeds are doing their job. They're building a stronger and more cohesive civil society. I went out with people last night, Chris, to a neighborhood that's not near my house, but one that has been attacked by ICE. It's an immigrant neighborhood, just to go to dinner so that we could support some of the local businesses that have been so badly impacted by this. And you know what? I looked around and I was not alone. People are actively engaged in that kind of civil society work that makes us stronger, that I think then allows us for the kind of sustained political action that you talked about.
Yeah, well, and, I want to address exactly what you're saying, because I love that, and it makes me so happy. And there is courage. There are people stepping up. And what's the best way to fight tyranny from this guy, me, who's saying that we're, the situation is as dire as it is? The best way to fight tyranny is to help your fellow man. Mm-hmm. Bring food to people who need food. House people who need housing. Be kind. Have fun. Make friends. Have close-knit communities that are built beyond more than your identity as an activist or somebody who's fighting back against the government. Find people you care about. Bring them together. Some of them will have different opinions. Care for each other. We don't need to, things don't have to be, the world ending. Much of what I'm arguing for, what I kind of propose through the soft secession model, is parallel structures and independence, so that we can take care of ourselves. We can do that. Especially when you talk about Democrat-run areas, they're well managed. Even the Democrats I don't like, they can run an organization in a way that you just don't get from Republicans. And so, build those networks, build the mutual aid, and build non-tax revenue. That's what I want to hear a lot more people talking about. Instead of just raising taxes on people, which we certainly should on the wealthy, but how can we develop municipal broadband? Tennessee, red state Tennessee, has municipal broadband. They're providing better service for their residents than they were being given before, and they're using it to make money, and then they get to use that money to invest in the community. We can just run things well in the Democrat areas, and then Trump can rule and the Republicans can rule over their loyal fiefdoms. And when people want to be refugees, I bet Chicago will be more than happy to accept some Louisiana refugees who are trying to escape the mess over there.
Well, all are welcome. And I'm going to tell you something just terribly sad, but Illinois tourism numbers skyrocketed in the last couple of years, and the biggest driver of that is medical tourism for people who are coming here for reproductive care that they cannot get in surrounding states.
Yeah, we go through something similar in Washington State. Mm-hmm. I'm in Spokane, Washington, so we're just about 45 minutes from the Idaho border, and we get a lot of folks coming over here, even from Montana. Now, I think there should be exemptions around reproductive rights, but, there's been discussion about charging.
This goes to your
Montana
question.
Oh,
hey, I hate to do this to you and interrupt you in the middle, but our time is like 30 seconds from dawn. So would you just tell people how they can read your fabulous stuff? Where do they find the existentialist? Let's end with that.
Yeah, just Substack.com and Medium.com. If you just Google the Existentialist Republic, we're the only one. So you'll find it. Thank you so much for having me. This was really a fantastic conversation.
All right, Chris, appreciate it. We'll do it again sometime.
Thanks. Excellent.
All right, everybody, we're going to go to the news, and when we come back, I'm going to talk to a fabulous journalist. Don't go away.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we're back, and now we can hear each other. And I was introducing Eric Garcia, the Washington bureau chief and Washington correspondent at The Independent. Eric, you can hear me now.
Yes, I can. How you doing?
Great. Hey, you've written so many interesting things, and there's so much to talk about. I guess I want to ask you the nitpickiest question to begin with. What's the future of the filibuster? And does that mean the end of budgets, in America?
Great question. As of right now, it's really up in the air. Some Republicans are saying, some Republicans like Bernie Moreno are talking about getting rid of it. Senator Josh Hawley. As of right now, it looks like Senate Majority Leader John Thune doesn't want to get rid of it. And I think the reason why is because, Senator Moreno from Ohio, who won a term last year, beat Senator Sherrod Brown, he said that you should lower the threshold to 55 and you can't raise taxes or raise spending on it. That sounds very logical. The problem with that is that the moment you do that for CRs, for continuing resolutions, there's no incentive to work together on continuing resolutions. Then you can just do continuing resolutions throughout the year, because then why go through the arduous process of doing the 12 spending bills every year? That just creates a loophole. And it cracks the door open to keeping spending bills to do spending bills to just getting rid of the filibuster for spending bills altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I have in my life changed my view of the filibuster. I was afraid and for it for a long time, and now I'm you know what? If they want to get rid of the filibuster, I think I might actually be okay with it. Get rid of it for everything. Right. You know, it's very hard to pass bills in Congress.
Yes.
Anyway, it's hard. And so the party that really doesn't want to pass anything benefits from a filibuster.
Yes.
Yeah. So if they want to get rid of it and jam their crazy, terrible budget down America's throat, which they're doing anyway, let their votes be counted, and let's hold them accountable.
Yeah, I mean, that typically is the argument. And then ironically enough, the filibuster also serves as a very convenient shield for a lot of other members, because even Republicans can. So, for example, Republicans, they can say, well, we can't pass a 12-week abortion ban because, you know what, there's 60 votes. And that allows a lot of other Republicans who may not want a 12-week abortion ban to just say, hey, we got a 60-vote threshold. We can't do it. It's very convenient. By contrast, and also the other fact of the matter is that Republicans don't need a filibuster to pass a lot of the stuff that they generally agree on, which are tax cuts and appointing judges. It's the really controversial stuff, like a 12-week abortion ban or bans on gender-affirming care or getting rid of the Department of Education, that all require getting rid of the filibuster. Whereas Democrats, a lot of their legislation, whether it's a $15 minimum wage, statehood for D.C. or statehood for Puerto Rico, or codifying abortion rights,
or the John Lewis,
or the John Lewis, the Voting Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Act, a renewal of the Voting Rights Act, all of that. The filibuster, they need to overcome a filibuster. So there's much more. Democrats benefit much more from getting rid of the filibuster, while Republicans, they tend to lose much more with the filibuster, politically and policy-wise.
Yeah. So I've evolved my position. It's terrifying what this Congress will do without a filibuster, but They're doing it anyway.
Right. I mean, you could make the argument that as of right now that they are doing the budget that they want to do right now with Russ Vought in charge of the Office of Minority and Budget. They did this with Doge, with Elon Musk. The argument that Angus King, one of the few members of the Democratic caucus who's an independent, said, it's really weird to say you're standing up to a bully when you hand him a weapon. But the other thing is that they're already doing this anyway.
They are definitely doing it anyway. Speaking of which, I mean, you cover Congress, so you might have the answer to this. Do you know, has anybody put out a reward for anyone who can find the Republican Congress in this moment of crisis?
I think that I think the Speaker Mike Johnson has essentially said, we did our job, we passed the continuing resolution, we don't need to do anything more. But also the fact of the matter is that if you get all the members of the House, if you get all the House Republicans in, then that creates rumblings. First and foremost, you got to swear in Adelita Grijalva, and then she'll sign the discharge petition for the Jeffrey Epstein files. On top of that, they also had to do the spending bills. They had to have the votes on the spending bills. They actually had to do their job, and that also might open the door for them having to come up with a solution for the extension for the Obamacare tax credits, even if it's separate from the CR. So there's just a lot of reasons for them to not stay in session if you're Speaker Mike Johnson.
Sure, but Americans are going to start to feel the ACA cuts. Americans are frustrated with the shutdown, and they're not, no matter what Mike Johnson's saying, they're not blaming Democrats.
No, the polling shows that they're not blaming the Democrats, they're blaming the Republicans. Ironically enough, and look, there's been a lot of criticisms of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Weirdly enough, he's probably played a bad hand as well as he could, whereas Trump and Mike Johnson have a really good hand, and they've played it poorly.
Yeah, that metaphor of who holds the cards. I keep seeing the Zelensky meeting in my head when I hear it. But yes, I mean, right. During the midst of a government shutdown, the president takes a wrecking ball to the White House and says, I'm going to build a palace.
Yes.
Right? During the government shutdown, it's announced that Kristi Noem has bought two, not one, but two private jets. Right? And I don't know, why does she need two? I mean, I thought one was for her and the other was for hair and makeup. But really, why does she need two?
There are arguments for security. There's arguments for all that, but the underlying thing is it's a bad look when the government is shut down, when SNAP is about to lapse next month, when WIC is about to run out of money. The Department of Agriculture said they're not going to use leftover money to shore it up. And it also is a bad look for the Department of Education to completely riff and lay off the entire Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services.
Yep.
This is money. So I think we should be clear. The money for special education went out before October 1st, but it's the staff. Everybody needs to understand this. With the Office of Special Education, it's the staff that enforces special education for students with disabilities.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know what. So Donald Trump says out loud,
right,
I'm cutting these things because they hurt Democrats. Right. I think what he means, he's cutting these things not because they hurt Democrats. They hurt everybody. I mean, people are hungry in red states.
Right.
SNAP is going to be a problem there. People have special education needs in red states. They're going to be hurt there. I think what he means is maybe Americans are getting hurt, but only one party actually cares.
Right. Only one party really actually cares. The irony of this is that, and a friend of mine said this, that Republicans don't do a really good job of sounding like they care about federal workers. And ironically enough, this probably came for the worst time for Republicans because there's a governor's race in Virginia just across the river. And guess what? There's a lot of federal workers there. Trump took a chainsaw to the Gateway Project in New Jersey. Guess what? There's the Gateway, the New Jersey, New York. Guess what? Yep. The Republican, it's actually a tighter race. Yeah, it's a tighter race than people expected.
Yep.
And again, in states like Oklahoma, so on average, I think 1 in 8 Americans is on SNAP, but in a state like Oklahoma, 1 in 6 Americans are on SNAP. And so this is going to disproportionately affect a lot of rural white people in states like Oklahoma and West Virginia and Kentucky and North Carolina and Ohio. So when he says that it's going to cut in projects that Democrats like, it's also programs that overwhelmingly benefit Republicans.
Yeah. I mean, and yet Democrats like them because, I don't know, maybe they actually care about America.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So let's take a moment on foreign affairs.
Sure.
I'm having a little trouble following the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky.
Yeah.
Trump's. I think it's been clear the whole time that Trump is with Putin and would love to be able to declare peace by getting Putin to agree to give up half his country. Getting Zelensky to agree to get rid of half his country, but that's not happening. So right. Trump says, "Well, I'm mad at Russia." But I can't keep. He's been mad at him, and then he's not been mad at him. Then he's been mad at him. He's been not mad at him. How is foreign policy supposed to work its way through this?
It's really difficult at this point. I believe not this past week, but the week before, the president invited Zelensky to the White House. It looked like he was going to offer the Tomahawk missiles, which are kind of the ace in the hole if Ukraine wants to win the war. But literally the day before, he called Vladimir Putin, and Putin said he said Putin wasn't too hot on sending Tomahawk missiles. I think that it's very difficult for Trump because he believes always that there's a transaction to be made, and that somewhat paid off when he kind of dog walked Bibi Netanyahu. But in a situation like Russia, where Vladimir Putin is very ideological, he wants the Donbass, he wants all of Ukraine, he wants Crimea. It's very hard to quote unquote make a deal, and I think that was why he was very frustrated with Putin when he was making strikes into Ukraine. But at the same time, he doesn't want to give the Tomahawks to Zelensky because that would mean, in his mind, that it would prolong the war, when ironically sending Tomahawks to Ukraine would likely end the war, because then Zelensky could fire them straight into Russia.
Yeah, ends the war on terms that Putin doesn't like.
Right.
And so that's not happening. Crazy that our president has chosen to change sides in a war and be on Putin's side. And in Israel, I want to give the Trump administration, I think they're the ones who did this,
right,
an enormous credit for a word. I think they said they were sending J.D. Vance to Israel to do babysitting.
Yes. Yes. No, they call it babysitting because of the fact of the matter is that they know that they can't trust Bibi Netanyahu.
Neither can the Israelis.
Neither can the Israelis, no. And neither can the Palestinians. To agree to the terms of it, it's kind of, now they've sent in Marco Rubio, they've sent in a lot of other people to kind of just make sure that he behaves. And all the while, ironically enough, it's not Bibi Netanyahu that they need to worry about. It's, people like Smotrich, who is the finance minister, who said a very racist remark about Saudi Arabia, saying they can continue riding on their camels, when, ironically enough, Israel really needs that normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia because it's millions upon billions of dollars of investment.
And legitimacy.
And legitimacy, yes.
And an end to hostilities that have gone on for 60 years.
Right.
So they're there, and American troops won't go to Gaza, they've said. But right on the Gaza border, inside Israel, the U.S. is now building a huge facility. And the head of CENTCOM was in Gaza. And he said, I just came from there. We're not sending American troops here. But they're building something called a civil military coordination center. And they're sending drones. I mean, what really is going on?
The answer is we really don't know what's going on. I mean, and the flip side of this is that now you have Qatari troops training in the United States of America. Secretary Hegseth has talked about this. You do need Arab countries, and I think Trump understands this, are very transactional, and they very much understand kind of the raw power politics and transactional politics, which is kind of why Trump works so well with them. But the real question is, what actually is this going to encompass? What actually is this going to entail? Because you could do drones, you could do all this, but one thing leads to another, and you're in for a penny, in for a pound. It's very easy to escalate this, and you could very easily wind up in a situation very similar to Libya with the Obama administration or the Vietnam War back in the 50s and 70s. So
not good. Or what are people in D.C., where the people you talk to in political D.C., saying about the demolition of the White House?
A lot of them are very surprised. A lot of them are seeing it as very as unnecessary. There's ways to add and renovate to the White House that don't completely decimate the East Wing. My first internship in Washington, D.C. was in the East Wing. I think a lot of people find it very crass. And again, this is going on during a government shutdown. Building a ballroom during a government shutdown when people are losing their WIC or losing their SNAP benefits is not the best form.
No, the optics are awful. But for me, Eric, the idea that he thinks it's his house,
right?
There's a process, and the White House has been changed a bunch of times,
yes.
But it's not up to the president by himself to decide what happens to that enormously important American landmark.
Right. There's boards, there's authorization groups, and then of course there's authorization from Congress, and there's appropriations from Congress. It's the idea that we don't have a king, we don't have kind of a palace, and I think, and you don't even need to look at the building of the ballroom. You just need to look at the Oval Office and how much gold is being added to it, and how much gilded aspects of it are being added. I mean, there are times where I look at it and it looks a little bit like Saddam's palace. One of my friends was a Marine and served in Iraq, and he stayed in Saddam's palace, and so it's kind of it does show that Trump is trying to add his own flair to it, and he's trying to add his own Trumpified, gaudy kind of 1970s era chic to the to the People's House.
Yeah, no good. Hey, we talked about SNAP and rising healthcare costs, and I guess they fired another inspector general this week. But are Republicans,
right?
Are they at all concerned that the president's poll numbers they're holding amongst people who say they're Republican,
right.
But they're crashing in the rest of the country. And the rest of the country, even if President, I'm sorry to say, Sky Turd, wants to show videos of him dropping stuff on it, people are not worried. They come out, they protest.
Yeah.
He's got his troops in my city in Chicago doing really awful things.
Right.
And the residents here are protecting each other. They're standing up. They're documenting everything. I mean, I'm really proud of my city. But do Republicans look at all of this and go, we need to mend our ways a little bit? Or do they go, we just need to get the troops and mow them down?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult to say at this point because, I don't really know what House Republicans are thinking because they're not here right now. I think that with Senate Republicans, I think that they recognize that this is going to be a tough midterm for them. That I mean, the other thing to take into account is that Trump couldn't have won last year without his support from Latinos, and his support from Latinos is actually cratering right now. And it's not just and they're the ones who are going to be hit the most by healthcare increases. Obviously, I grew up in Southern California. It's interesting just how kind of dead silent Los Angeles and Southern California is. This should be a fun time. The Dodgers are in the World Series.
Yep.
It's a great time to be a Mexican American in Los Angeles, but there is really a culture of fear. And I think that Republicans, they are kind of aware and attuned to the fact that they're becoming increasingly unpopular, but they're almost kind of dealing with a sunk cost fallacy where they're kind of like, well, we've already, bear hugged Trump this much, so we might as well bear hug him some more. So.
Yeah, well, they put themselves in a position where either they go down or the country goes down.
Right.
That is a very dangerous place.
Politically, it's not a smart move either. You want to be able to distance yourself with the president. I mean, back in the day, Democrats used to distance themselves from Barack Obama all the time, and Republicans in 2006 distanced themselves from George Bush and the war in Iraq. So
Yep. Well. Is the stuff going on in city? I mean, I think there are 4 cities now where he's tried to send troops. It's
yes.
Portland, Memphis, D.C., Los Angeles, Chicago, and he's been back and forth on San Francisco.
Right.
Do people there look at that and go, wow, look, like armed troops in all of these cities, not just one, but all of them? That really says something awful. And do people in D.C. Is that register with any of these?
I think it registers with people because we've had troops in our city. It's funny. My Metro stop, which is across the street from where I live, my apartment, is there are National Guard troops there. And I think the thing to take into account is that I think, yes, is crime a problem in cities like D.C. and Chicago and things like that? Yes. But one of the things that's been so
they're not here for crime.
They're not here for crime. The thing that I just see in Chicago is they're at the Miracle Mile. That's where the tourists are. It's not the This week, until yesterday, they were in one of the safest neighborhoods, not just in Chicago, but in the whole country. Right.
Right, where there's like there's been 0 murders and very little, and they're running around and throwing tear gas canisters in the streets.
Right, and it's the same deal with Washington, D.C. They're not going to the areas like Anacostia and the areas with high murder rates or drug dealers. They're going to the places where the tourists go, which are the most anodyne, sterilized areas in the country or in the city. And I think that's the thing is that and again, one of the things that I think that Americans, one of the kind of cold hard truths that Americans that Trump administration is learning is, like, Americans don't like crime. Yeah, big shocker right there. But they also don't like troops in boots marching or mowing through their cities. Right. They don't like the optics of troops being in their city.
I believe the Republicans invented the term jackbooted thugs.
Yes.
Having invented the term, you didn't think they would put on the jackboots and act like thugs, but
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Eric, we are out of time. It went by very fast. I've loved this conversation. Will you come back?
You bet. Let's do it again. All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Wait, before you go, tell everybody how to find your work.
You can read me over at The Independent. You can read me on MSNBC. You can follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at the same handle, Eric M. Garcia. See you around.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate it.
See ya.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want you to hear an interview that I taped yesterday with Just a fabulous woman. She used to be the chief medical officer at the CDC. Stay tuned.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Come on in. We have a lot to talk about today, for sure. I am talking to the fabulous Deb Houry, who served our country for a decade at the CDC. She was its chief medical officer. Her colleagues described her as brilliant, hardworking, and effective. Her work earned her the AMA's Award for Outstanding Government Service. Her talent, her determination to serve the public, it served America well for years. But those same qualities drove her to resign the post in August so that she could warn Congress and all of us about the disastrous leadership of Bobby Kennedy and the increased risks now confronting every American. Deb, thank you so much for your courage, for your outspokenness, and for your willingness to join all of us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Deb, the question I really want to ask you, because you told Congress when we still had a Congress that met, that Republicans and Democratic administrations alike that you served under had different priorities, but they always put the facts and the public health first. So before we get into the ominous until now part, I think it's really important for people to understand the fabulous work that the CDC did over the years. I don't think when people hear, oh, we're getting rid of another government agency, they have no clue what a fabulous government agency is under attack.
So, what I would say about CDC is I was actually an ER doc, in a county hospital. When I had the opportunity to join CDC, I jumped at it because I saw the opportunity to really take care of the nation and communities as my patients. And that's what CDC does. It's boots on the ground in all the communities, protecting us, the American public, and around the world from different health threats, whether it's making sure that we're getting screened for high blood pressure or cancer, to responding to overdose or suicide clusters in communities, to working with countries, to prevent Ebola from coming to our shores. That is what I think is so special about CDC. And I had worked at CDC for over 10 years through 4 administrations, really in a bipartisan fashion, because it comes down to taking care of, I put my ER hat on, the patient, which means the population. And when you talk with Congress, if you're focusing on health outcomes, usually you can find that common ground. This past year, I was the transition lead for CDC, which meant that every 4 years there's a presidential election and we bring a new administration in, and a lot of our political advisors will change. So I was prepared. I had read RFK Jr.'s books, as well as many of the papers of the incoming administration, to really have the agency prepared to see where we could support new priorities. Unfortunately, though, that's where things really started to come apart, and that is just when we saw that data and science were not driving decisions. It was more ideology. So for the first few months, you always get used to new bosses and priorities, and so, tried to learn what was helpful for them. I think for me, what was kind of an alarm was during the measles outbreak. We weren't hearing from the secretary, and we'd offered to brief him. And we did not brief him. We pointed out the increasing cases, provided talking points on vaccines, and that's where he had promoted misinformation, saying that the vaccines had fetal parts or were killing people, and that wasn't helpful to do in the middle of an outbreak. We needed to focus on prevention. Certainly there were things like a role for vitamin A for treatment, but not for prevention. And then he had highlighted healers in Texas that were supporting unproven treatments like budesonide and clarithromycin, which I were worried, could actually cause harm if people were using things that weren't indicated for measles. So for me, that's when things started to come apart.
I think American ignorance about what you've done could just remind me, the flu vaccine every year that we get it. People think, oh, I got the flu vaccine, but it's really not the same vaccine every year. There's a ton of work that goes into making it effective every year. And the CDC had people all over the world tracking viruses and how they moved. Can you talk a little bit about just about the complexity of keeping Americans healthy?
Yeah, so, we're always monitoring different strains, so whether it's that new COVID variant or what's going into the flu vaccine, and our labs around the world, are testing for these different health threats. And even in airports in the U.S., we're looking for things like that. But that requires resources and staff. And currently, with many of the staff firings as well as proposed budget cuts, that's going to leave America less safe. And I'm concerned, too, with the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, that we're losing a lot of those partnerships with countries. And so we won't have that visibility, which, again, is about protecting ourselves from threats abroad and in the U.S.
You guys also protected us from biohazards, I think, as well. I mean, it's the importance of the CDC is so for Americans to see because you did your job.
Yes, when we do our job, people don't see it because we prevented something from happening. Or, the beauty of our non-communicable disease work is we've prevented those overdoses. People with high blood pressure, are now controlled and not going on to have heart disease. People are screened early for cancer. And that's what's so important, is ensuring people can live the healthiest lives possible.
And, there was a scare a few years back with something called a Zika virus.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that and the work that you did. It was terrifying, particularly for pregnant women. They were scared to death, and with good reason.
Well, and I think that the Zika virus just shows why you need all of CDC together. And there's a new virus or an emerging virus called Oropouche, which is very similar to Zika. And with Zika, what we found was it was sexually transmitted, but it came from mosquitoes. So you would never think that something that could bite you could then transmit sexually as well. We learned that, and then we needed an environmental health specialist to talk about how do you control the mosquitoes. Then we needed a reproductive health specialist to talk about the impact it had on pregnant moms and the babies, because we did see some birth defects. And then you needed certainly the entomologists and all the infectious disease experts. So that's where you really needed an all-of-an-agency approach. And one of the things I raised for the incoming administration is in South America, there's a disease called Oropouche, transmitted through midges and mosquitoes, and we're now seeing it in Cuba and Dominican Republic and other areas. My concern, we've had travel-associated cases in the U.S., not domestically acquired yet, but my concern is if we're not prepared for it and not monitoring it, we're going to have another Zika on our hands.
And that led to really frightening birth defects that really terrified people. So we're less safe. I get it. Less prepared. What is, in your sense, what is the administration thinking? If they're not thinking this is about keeping us safe, do they just don't believe that we're at risk?
I really can't speak to what the administration is thinking. And honestly, when I saw the recent reductions in force and firings this past 2 weeks, it left me very confused. The secretary has talked about the need for conflicts of interest and vetting them and decreasing bias. But he fired the Conflicts of Interest Office at CDC. Mm-hmm. Similarly, the Institutional Review Board office that protects human subjects in research was fired. And many of these things are needed for that vaccine committee that he has made a priority. So this really leaves CDC hampered, unable to do a lot of its basic job, including when you don't have an HR department at all.
When you reflect back on the sort of attack on CDC, it began during COVID. What was CDC doing during COVID that drew the wrath? Maybe nothing, or maybe it was just an easy target because the country was hurting so much. But how do you think about that? You're out there every day at risk, trying to save the country during a terrible pandemic. And suddenly the guns are turned on you. What was that like?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, this was really an unprecedented pandemic where CDC as well as other agencies were still learning, what the virus, was, how you protect, yourself from it, the vaccine initially, and the science was evolving. And so, some guidance that was issued early needed to change when there was more information. So I think that really led to distrust of the CDC, when our director was saying one thing and then it would change a few months later. And I think that's just where CDC learned to be much more upfront about what we know today, what we don't know, what could change. And that's really the principles of crisis communication. And there were some missteps. There were some lab issues. But what I can tell you is, I was brought up to the office of the director midway through COVID to look at what were the lessons learned and how could CDC improve going forward. Mm-hmm. The CDC really looked at lab quality. They have new measures in place and working much more with private sector. They also looked at data timeliness. They were faxed reports, and we didn't have access to state health department data for some of these things. That was all put in place during COVID so that going forward, it wouldn't happen again. But my concern is we're backsliding now as a nation with a lot of those improvements.
So, for example, I guess we're now in the second or third set of measles running around the country. And the CDC it used to work with states when there was an outbreak. And that can't be happening now in the same way.
Well, it can't be happening in the same way because there's less boots on the ground. CDC has lost about 30% of its workforce. In addition, as we lose different experts, like from occupational health, where they do a lot of the ventilation safety, that makes it difficult to assess, different environments. But CDC is still continuing to work with states, certainly more difficult during a furlough right now. But in general, they have been working with states. And this year they did deploy to Texas for the measles outbreak. I don't know if they've deployed to South Carolina or Utah. But I do want to point out, CDC doesn't just deploy to states. States have to ask. So you have to have that partnership.
Yep. There's a big public education aspect to public health. And the CDC's website has long been a thing that, not just Americans, people from all over the world have looked to for guidance on what's the best science on how to take care of ourselves and how to respond to all kinds of things related to public health. That website looks to me like it's now becoming just another campaign, a political campaign. What's lost?
Yeah, I was disappointed. I saw that changed shortly after I left. And in my mind, CDC should be just focused on data and science and really not have any of political priorities or agenda items on there, because you want people to understand how to protect yourself. And you want everybody to feel comfortable looking at the website, see themselves in the guidance. And many of the things that were put on the website don't even have anything to do with CDC. And so that just makes people automatically start to step back and not trust CDC. There's amazing staff still at CDC, but I almost call it like a hostile takeover right now because the front office really has allowed some of these changes.
And I don't have a good enough imagination to understand the political benefit to anybody of making the CDC partisan, but for it's a few patronage jobs, I guess, if that's how you think about it. But it seems in a country the size of the United States, that's silly. What can they gain by this?
Yeah, and in my mind, it's really not political or partisan, is ideology. Because, like in the ER, to me, I never knew who was a Republican or a Democrat. You just take care of the patient. Same thing with communities for public health. You take care of everybody. And so it should be about, how do you protect yourself from diseases? How do you respond to, a train derailment? We all want the same thing. And so for me, this is really about the secretary's ideology that we're seeing reflected.
And that ideology, it's weird because I'm used to ideology being a political ideology. This sort of isn't. It's an ideology about vaccines, which is...
And President Trump, I really applaud him and thank him for getting his COVID and flu vaccine. And I think that's important for the nation to see and recognize that he understands the importance of vaccines, and he launched Operation Warp Speed. So that's why I think it's more of an ideology versus politics.
Yeah, I'm used to ideologies being about politics, and this ideology isn't really. It's about I don't know what it's about. It's about, I believe that the species is better if we just all get sick and the healthy ones live.
Yeah, and it's tricky because I did read, several of the secretary's books. And, I'm a scientist. So I like to see, what I can learn. And as I was reading, some of his, pieces, I would kind of question and go, gosh, I wasn't aware of this. Then I would go check the reference until it was from a retracted study. And to me, that was really disappointing.
Yeah, so on top of it being an ideology, what you're saying is it's an ill-informed one based on junk science.
Yes.
Yeah. And so junk science now is the official science of the United States government as far as our public health agencies go.
And, I think it's okay to ask questions. Science does evolve and change. So it's okay to ask the questions and look, but we have to agree on what is valid science and data. And, if you've got retracted studies or things that appear in Snopes, those are not the things I'd make policy decisions off of.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening, scientists are, in my experience, are the last persons on the planet who claim that they actually know everything.
Yes.
Right? Every single thing they discover, they say this is provisional until we have better data and a better way of understanding it. Yeah. So it's usually ideologues who claim they actually know what's going on, and that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah, and that's what I have found to be difficult because I'm willing to have a discussion with anyone, but we all have to agree, where we can find that common ground, and some of that still has to be based on what is true science and data. And, you can't just say the earth is flat, we've got good data that shows that it's not, and so that's where there's that push-pull.
And science itself evolves.
Yes.
In middle school, people are taught the scientific method, but the method itself evolves. It gets more complex and more fine-tuned, really, to the problems it's trying to understand. Not solve, but understand. Like
with the vaccine committee, like what we saw was, they ranked data in science, like randomized controlled trials was at the top, personal anecdotes at the bottom. And that's how you need to evaluate data in science is the best gold standard science at the top. The issue we had, this most recent vaccine committee meeting that CDC put on was the committee members called themselves rookies, and they were bringing personal anecdotes, didn't understand process and procedure, and weren't valuing the most gold standard science. And that's when it's difficult to have those conversations.
I think what I saw was not just not valuating gold standard science, but not recognizing it, not recognizing the different sets of data based on the way they were collected and the way people understand them aren't all equally valuable either.
Agree. And even bringing in, I believe it was during the hepatitis B discussion, bringing in discussion on a version of that vaccine that's not even in the U.S. So it really was not relevant to the discussion and just confused things.
Yeah. Well, so how do you see a way forward that protects America's health? Are the refugees from this government finding ways to organize outside of the government to help protect Americans?
So I think that's starting to happen, and that's both good and bad, right? Because I know many states are now looking at how they can develop their own health policies, collect their own data. And I understand that, but I don't want to see differences in which state you live in as to, your access to public health and healthcare and data. I'm working with several of these states now to really, help advise on how they can have good public health and healthcare in their communities. Mm-hmm. I do think, though, I don't want to lose sight of what could be done at the federal government. And I think if Congress had oversight, and allowed CDC to have the authority and to have a permanent scientific leader and to look at things like the advisory committees, make sure they're actually following all the federal advisory committee processes, had rigorous discussions, brought in the right experts, and none of that is happening.
I so appreciate that, but it is a pipe dream with this current Congress. I mean, this current Congress isn't even in session, right? They've gone into hiding. They're like in the witness protection program somewhere because they don't want to have to say what happened to the East Wing of the White House is like ridiculous and terrible, and we don't want a palace there. But so they're hiding. They're not going to do any oversight.
Yeah, we do need Congress, certainly, I'd say, to pass the budget.
Would be nice, but they don't, that's not going to happen with this. I mean, you're not a political actor. I am. And I'm just like, they won't do it. Yeah. This is not, we aren't going to get the oversight that every administration, no matter what party, needs. We're not going to get the investigations, good and ill, that our government needs to do well with this Congress. It's just not possible. We need a political change in order to get the scientific one you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think until we have that, you will see I saw many of the big cities now have also banded together and put out a note that they're going to issue their own vaccine recommendations. I tell people, talk to your doctor right now for the best medical advice. And, I would always say talk to your doctor, but now I think there's less alternative sources like the CDC for some recommendations for people to trust. And that's what
sometimes vaccines that you used to be able to get now require a prescription in some states. It's a complicated mess. And these vaccines don't just protect the person who gets the vaccine. They stop the virus from having a reservoir to mutate and change and go after the people who did get vaccines. You can't protect yourself alone. That's why it's public health.
And that's why with things like measles, vaccinations are particularly important because it is so contagious. And that we see if the vaccination rates drop below 95%, that then you start to see, people become infected. And many of these places, actually all the ones that are having the outbreaks, have vaccination rates lower than 95%, some, in the 80s. And that's where we're seeing that the virus really sets up, camp and can then, find, different hosts.
And Americans are blasé about measles. They're like, well, I had it as a kid. It can't be that serious. Even if it's not killing people, it's enormously expensive for our society.
It's enormously expensive, and it did kill people. It killed 2 children and 1 adult this year. And then we saw in California, there was somebody that died from measles, delayed encephalitis. And so what people are forgetting is that even if you recover from measles, you can have longer-term consequences from it. And many people were hospitalized, with pneumonia and other issues. So it's not a harmless childhood disease. And we're lucky that we have vaccines in the United States for many of these childhood preventable diseases, and I would just say as a mom and a doc, I've been always encouraged people, to take care of their families and their loved ones.
So what do you think's going on in Florida? What's going to be the impact of a state saying we're no longer going to say you have to have vaccines to come to school? I think they put every child in jeopardy.
I think they're also putting tourism in jeopardy. I think, you think about Disney and, being right there in Florida, as a parent, if I had a young child or somebody who's immunocompromised, I would be worried if I knew that the vaccine rates were low around there.
Sure. And then I suppose they will have outbreaks of one thing or another, and that will also be a problem for them. Wow, I didn't even think about that. Well, this is hopeful, right? Now, so right now we are organizing, as you said, it's not preferable, it's not smart, but we're organizing outside of government.
Yes. We're outside of federal government.
Outside of federal government, yeah. And organizations like the AMA and others stepping up and trying to do what they can in this crisis.
So I would say, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Physicians in particular, as well as American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, have really been out there when it comes to guidelines around vaccinations and speaking. I would say many of the state governments now are also banding together to really look at how they can really prepare for protecting the health of their citizens across state borders as well. They've got regional approaches. So I would say, people are starting to reinvent, public health and prevention more locally and through organizations.
Are we more at risk for a COVID-like global virus now than we were before COVID?
I would say we are more at risk in that we won't see it coming. And then if it does come, we're not going to be prepared because we won't have the people on the ground. We won't have a coordinated response, and we likely won't have the resources. So I am very worried. That's the thing that keeps me up at night is to, when, I shouldn't say, because we know at some point
something's coming.
That we will not be prepared.
Well, Deb, I really appreciate your spending time. I know you've got a tight schedule, but listen, not every hero in America wears a uniform. And you are one of them. You have done an enormous service to the country in government, and you did an enormous service to America when you left government.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I really hope, everybody gets their flu and COVID vaccine this season and stay safe.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. A little after 3 o'clock here in the upper Midwest, and I am thrilled to be joined by Devin Remiker, who leads the Wisconsin Democrats. As everyone listening to this show knows, that's an organization we have all supported here on the show. Many of us went and joined the WIS Dems going door to door in past campaigns. We've made calls. People have even sent money. Wisconsin, I mean, these are bleak times, right? But Wisconsin and the Democrats in Wisconsin, the good people in Wisconsin, showed America that it's possible to break a terrible gerrymander and to limit the damage that seems to be the goal of radical right-wing state legislators. Devin picks up where Ben Wickler left off in the midst of doing good trouble. Devin, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Edwin. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much to everyone that's helped support us through the years. It's really helped make a tremendous difference.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, you're not done. There's more, right? You got more to do up there.
Of course we did.
Yeah, I mean, the fair maps that you won after a brutal decade of fighting broke the GOP hold in the state house. Now you might actually be able to do that in the Senate too, right?
Absolutely. In both the Senate and the Assembly, we have the opportunity to win majorities next year. This wasn't even remotely possible. I mean, despite the fact that, Wisconsin is the quintessential 50-50 purple state, we basically had Republican supermajorities or close to supermajorities in both chambers before these maps were changed and made fair. Last year, in 2024, Democrats picked up 14 seats. And now we are only 2 seats in the state Senate away and 5 in the state Assembly from being able to have majorities. And if we can retain the Democratic governorship as well, we are looking at the potential for a trifecta in the state of Wisconsin, which was just unimaginable.
Unimaginable. Scott Walker is, I think, still alive and walking around, but he's metaphorically rolling over in his grave.
Yes, he is still rolling. He is currently working with, I believe, a National Republican Youth Group, which is just fascinating to me. Yes, we are thrilled to have been able to turn the corner on the Walker era and be on the cusp of something I think is just really exciting, which is the possibility for Democrats to have an entirely new generation of leadership and be able to deliver for working people. And I am just so excited to play my part in helping to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure Wisconsin is a 50-50 state. I mean, I know what happened in the last election everywhere, but you look at what the majority that you created for the Supreme Court race in your state and the governor's race, which, you won twice now. I think a lot of people are just upset with the quality of life that Republican leadership delivered in your state.
I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, it's not just Democrats. I mean, I think a lot about the Supreme Court race that we had earlier this year. Susan Crawford had a tremendous victory, almost 10 percentage points, as did Janet Protasewicz in 2023. But that was after Elon Musk spent almost $60 million. I mean, whether it was television, digital advertising, literally bribing voters, by the time that was all done and dusted, they threw everything they had. And, the sort of harkening back to how you started this off, the thing that was sort of most heartening to me was just how resoundingly Wisconsinites rejected that. Yeah. And it wasn't just Democrats. You don't get to, almost 10-point margins of victory in this state without reaching conservatives and independents. And we did that by fighting back, by calling a spade, and Elon Musk, a billionaire oligarch who was trying to buy an election, and pointing out just that Susan Crawford just wanted to have fairness on the court. She just wanted to make sure that someone wasn't going to be bought and paid for by someone like Elon Musk. And that resonated across party lines. And I think that we can't be afraid to call things what they are and fight tooth and nail in this moment because everything's on the line.
Yeah, and you have another Supreme Court race coming too.
Yes, we do. In April of next year, we have another Supreme Court race. And, this one is actually for a seat that is currently held by a conservative. Rebecca Bradley is the incumbent justice who holds that seat, but she decided not to run for re-election, partially because she has seen just how effective we are at organizing and fighting in these spring elections to help power victories. But there is another conservative that has stepped up, Maria Lazar, who is basically a fringe conservative justice. In the past, she's been endorsed by folks like Michael Gableman, who helped run the sham investigation of the 2020 election. He's now been basically disbarred in this state for his
We've talked about him on this show, but it's been a while. He is a real clown, and he was on the Supreme Court.
Yes. Yeah. So she's cut from the same cloth, and
But you have a strong candidate running for that seat.
Chris Taylor is the Democratic Party's endorsed.
Yes, she's fabulous.
Yes, she's fantastic, and she's a judge on the Court of Appeals right now. She's running an incredibly strong campaign, and I just want to underscore, although this isn't going to change the majority, right? This can help us expand a majority that believes in fairness on the court. There is a Supreme Court election every year, 26, 27, 28. If Republicans ran the table on those, they would be able to win control of the court back in time to rule on the 2028 presidential election. Yeah. And in 2020, we were only one vote shy on our court of having our results overturned. We were one of the closest, if not the closest state in the entire country to not having our proper electoral votes counted. So I don't think conservatives, especially with what we're seeing from Trump and the anti-democratic administration and his allies right now, I don't think they're going to give us a pass just because we kicked Elon Musk's butt, even though he spent $60 million.
And Devin, I mean, what we have to say over and over and over again, particularly when it comes to judicial races or judicial appointments, is that this isn't about getting a conservative or a liberal judge on the law. This is about getting, because if it was up to you, you would not pick left-leaning Michael Gableman to put on that court. You wouldn't at the Supreme Court pick a left-leaning Clarence Thomas to put on that court. This is about whether you have jurisprudence, you have the rule of law as we understand it, as opposed to having a court that just does politics.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's why I say I believe in a fair majority on the court, not a Democratic or Republican majority. And, I look at how the justices, Rebecca Bradley was one of them, contorted themselves in 2020 to go along with some of the worst, most flimsy arguments that were ultimately about throwing out over 200,000 voters' votes lawfully cast in the state of Wisconsin over just basically made up technicalities and misinformation. That is exactly the type of individuals who are supporting Maria Lazar and leave me so concerned about her being on the bench. But I'm thrilled that I know Chris Taylor can be a fair, reasonable, and independent justice on the bench. And I really look forward to supporting her and making sure Maria Lazar is not elected.
Full disclosure, next week I'm coming up to your state to a fundraiser for her.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. All right. But we've talked about a Supreme Court race, but there are a lot of important races in the state, small ones and bigger ones to watch. Talk about some that you're really paying attention to.
Absolutely. Well, the really big one for us is the governorship. So our incumbent governor, Democrat Tony Evers, decided not to seek re-election. He, by the time he'll be done, have been governor for 8 years in this state, and he has done an amazing job. He is, by the
way, one of the best defensive players I've ever seen, because that's really the job he was dealt.
He is the Micah Parsons of governors. He is unrelenting. And he, my predecessor, Ben, would often say that his veto pen was perhaps one of the most important collections of atoms in the defense of democracy in these very turbulent years. And it is absolutely the truth. Yep. I am both excited to retain a governor that's able to be an equally skilled defensive player, but also someone who can be a partner to hopefully a Democratic legislature, which I know we also touched on. But I think the trifecta has to be our starting point here. We have to aim for what we want to do and center the fact that, winning all this, politics, elections, we talk about winning and, how to produce that sort of outcome. The real outcome, the real goal of this work, the reason that I'm in it, and I know everyone ultimately is spending their money, time, energy, effort, is to be able to affect change in people's lives. And the way to ensure that we get that done is to be able to win the governorship, the assembly, and the Senate. We can just see Republicans will obstruct at any chance they get. And I think that is sort of my starting point. So, we have a primary for the governorship. Yep. There's a field of really great candidates that are emerging. And, the only sort of hang up is that our primary is August 11th. So we have one of the latest primaries in the entire country. We have 84 days between the primary and the general election. So it is a sprint. And I am really excited that we have a governor readiness project, a joint project between the state party and Governor Evers to ensure that our nominee has all the resources and the team that they need to be successful when we reach that point. But at the same time, when we look at sort of the other side, Tom Tiffany is essentially the de facto nominee for the Republican Party in this state. He is a U.S. congressman right now. He represents northern Wisconsin. Very conservative, and he was the most MAGA candidate sort of amongst the primary candidates. The more moderate Republican Bill Berrien dropped out after he had a social media scandal, to put it politely, and he quickly has consolidated support. This is an individual that has co-sponsored a 6-week abortion ban, has gone along with the tariffs that Trump has laid down that have decimated soybean farmers in the state, along with working families driving up the cost of goods, and will just be a rubber stamp for Trump. So we are really focused on holding him accountable every step of the way while our candidates are able to have a discussion about their vision and their ideas for the party in the future. And I think that's a good thing right now. Personally, I think that, everyone is looking to figure out what is next for the Democratic Party. And to me, this primary is coming at a time where I think it's going to be a really healthy process to let voters weigh in on what are the ideas.
I couldn't agree with you more, Devin.
They're looking for.
I couldn't agree with you. I mean, for reasons that you and I know having to do with the timing, we didn't have a presidential primary last cycle, and it hurt us a lot, because the attention then was on the other side. Donald Trump got all the airwaves, and I think as you go through this primary, people are going to be interested in the candidates and what they have to say, and the attention will be there. And attention is it's like money in politics. It's very important.
It's the most precious resource of all at this point. A lot of the times you're spending money to try to get people's attention, which makes it the sort of, base currency of what we're shooting for here. Yeah.
So I think that the primary is going to be helpful. I mean, I want to go back to what you said when you introduced these races, that what we're doing it for is to improve the lives of the people who are in this country, in your state, in my city. Unfortunately for Wisconsin, you're part of this terrible real life experiment because your neighboring state to the west, Minnesota, and Wisconsin are very similar on all kinds of measures. Very similar. They're similar kinds of economies, all of it. And at the beginning of the Scott Walker era, fairly similar in sort of the public outcomes. And then they went in different ways, and they did better at attracting private capital and investment. They did better in measures of public health and life expectancy. They did better in educational attainment. And the only difference was that your state ended up with a Republican supermajority, and theirs didn't. So you have a live experiment, which I look forward to Wisconsin being up when you get your trifecta back.
I look forward to it as well. And I think this, if you look at what happened in Wisconsin, also in comparison to what's happening nationally right now, in the second Trump administration. I see so many parallels. The way that Scott Walker essentially exercised power in a way that we had never seen before to sort of suppress the opposition party, to do away with dissent. In light of extraordinary sort of citizen grassroots pushback against things like Act 10, he really just pushed forward and exercised raw power. And then they proceeded to redraw our maps, permanently stack the deck against us, or what they thought was permanently, until we were able to finally have fair maps again in this state, and just continue to, sort of shut us down and shut us out. I see a lot of the similar themes happening now. And there's a lot of individuals I talk to that obviously are really scared in this moment, that feel like there may not be a way out of this mess. But I can tell you there is. You've been through a smaller version of this in Wisconsin, but you have to fight tooth and nail every single election, bit by bit, block by block, and build your way up. But there is a way out.
I'm so glad to have you on the show today, because one of my earlier guests was just despondent and did not see a way out.
And I understand it. There was a period, especially after 2016, I think, where we were in shock in the state of Wisconsin, and as many people were across the country. But it really felt as if we could go more direction of a red state than a blue state, or a purple state. We were hanging onto the edge of the cliff by the tips of our fingers, and we just had to climb. And it really started with focusing on the Supreme Court. It seems far-fetched, but if we can just win, three more races, we'll be able to get there and get back to majority. We did do it, and the path is going to be different. It's going to be done at the states, and I think that's really what we have to focus on. There's a big hunger for a national leader in the party right now, and
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, well,
primary will take care of that, and that's a couple of years away. We have to do the work in the states. We have to do the work. I mean, what you said before was that you did it, election by election, but really that's not fair to you, because what you did was build something that worked every day. Yeah. Not just in election cycles, but you were organizing people. You were telling people who cared about their state, hey, there's an on-ramp you can take to become involved in helping your state be a better place. And people liked that, and they took that opportunity. And then they met other people doing it, and it became a big organizing success. And at the national level, we're beginning to see this muscle that the left hasn't used in 60 years, big organizing, big civil civic efforts of massive organizing. But you did that in Wisconsin, and you turned it to politics, but it helped build community while you were doing it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the key things right now, especially in rural Wisconsin. The absence of community leaves people feeling so alone and so isolated. Yeah. If they don't think that their neighbors, if they think that they're all on the other side, they may not be willing to come out. They might not be willing to take action. They can feel afraid. So finding ways to build community and organize people to sort of build that machine and that framework is so important. And our year-round organizing has just been critical to what we've done, to what we have done. And that starts not even just with Ben, but with his predecessor, Chair Martha Lanning. She actually laid down this framework in the state. And now we have over 270 neighborhood teams. Each of them essentially replicate the work of what you would normally pay a full-time, field organizer staffer to do. It has enabled us to really have a very efficient citizen-led grassroots machine. And, next weekend we have 1 year to win. So I know there's critical elections in Virginia and New Jersey. But in Wisconsin, we're still going to be out there talking to folks. And as a bonus, we'll be phone banking into those states as well to help do our part to move this country forward as well. But we will have 425 Canvas launches in over 114 municipalities around the state, which is just tremendous. I mean, our reach and our scale is so large. We are oftentimes in a campaign cycle. There's a lot of fantastic folks that step up and help reach out to people outside of the Democratic Party, but it's usually isolated to a handful of cities. We are almost everywhere in the state, talking to folks and communicating about the issues year round. And I mean, that's how we have to do it. You have to make the commitment.
Well, and I mean, Illinois is a Democratic state, but we don't have a Democratic Party in anything like the sense that you do. Ours is old school. It's the legislative leadership and the lobbyists got together and they fund a Democratic Party. Most of the great candidates I've known in my life have run against the party in primaries. Proud Democrats, but nonetheless not thrilled with the way the party works. In your state, you've built it from the bottom up. So it's a very different kind of feel, and it's much stronger, more resilient in some ways. And it's become a model around the country. I mean, I talked to, North Carolina. I was talking to Rita Hart in Iowa the other day. These guys are all looking to your model to replicate to save the country, particularly states with big rural populations.
And those are fantastic state parties that I think, have really internalized, sort of that core lesson of building from the bottom up. And, I've also talked with your own state party relatively recently. About helping to sort of adopt that and build it as well. Obviously, having the powerhouse, Chicago is a little bit different than, a little old Iowa or Wisconsin. But ultimately, I do think it's a model that can work everywhere. Sometimes you have to adjust it a little bit. But I think that there is, sort of really growing recognition that this isn't just, some fluke for Wisconsin that worked out really well and isn't something you can replicate. But really, it does require the state parties to have resources, to have support, to have buy-in. And that could be one of the hardest hurdles to clear for folks is sort of being able to have a fresh start. And I think that is, something that each state has to figure out how they can resource the team to sort of boot up this operation. But once they do, once they're able to get to the point like we are, where there are those, really core group of neighborhood teams, it is so effective and much more efficient than just popping up, shop every other year for the campaign season and then having to fold up and then relearn all the same lessons and rebuild all the same relationships 2 years later.
Yeah, you can't just show up right before an election and say to people, vote for me. You need to be listening to people and being part of a community all year long. And when you do it, that's powerful.
Exactly.
It also fights the cynicism that's undermined so much of our politics.
Exactly. And it leaves an open door for people. At moments like this, I was at a No Kings protest in Reedsburg, Wisconsin, which is right next to where I live, over this past weekend. And I mean, there were hundreds of people. Most of them hadn't even, participated in something really political before. This was their first thing. And, it is really amazing to see that organizing work occurring. I sort of view the party's role as complementary. I'm not there to subsume or overtake or feel pride of ownership over every single thing that happens in the state of Wisconsin. It's great that they're bringing people out. Yep. But at the same time, I want to make sure that folks know that we're on the same team. We're trying to make the same change, and that there are other ways that they can get involved. There's more things that they can do. Yeah. But if you don't sort of have those open doors all across the state at moments like this, you're missing people that may not realize, oh, hey, there's a county party I can join. They have monthly meetings and a happy hour every month. Mm-hmm. Those are future county party leaders, neighborhood team leaders, potentially elected officials of tomorrow that are coming online right now. And I want to make sure that they know about us for the long term.
Yeah, they should. So I hear people say, and it's in the press a lot, people are angry at Democrats. The more they get mad at Donald Trump, they get mad at Democrats for not stopping him. And they say, well, Democrats don't stand for anything. They don't, what do they really stand for? Do you think that we need to have a party platform before we have a candidate, that we need to get out there and just say, look, this is who we are? I mean, I look at the candidates that you talked about today, the candidates who I see running in state after state, and the shared values are completely clear. There's not 100% agreement on policy, and you wouldn't want it in a big tent party, but there's an enormous sense of who we are, that you know and I know, we feel it, but somehow everybody else doesn't see it that way. What can we do about that?
Well, Edwin, so as the chair of a state party, and I
probably not a fair question.
No. I'm happy to answer it. I'm dealing with this in a microcosm with our gubernatorial primary, right?
Yep.
And when you say platform, I think a lot of people are going to think about, okay, this is the policy we support. This is the plan that we're sort of going to stamp and say is officially supported. And I think that is just a little bit of a bridge too far for the party, to be honest.
Yep.
What I focus on is exactly what you said, the values, what is most important to the party and how do we define ourselves? And, to me, that is crystal clear right now. We need to make clear that we are the party that is going to fight for the working class in this country. We are the party that is going to defend your fundamental rights and freedoms. And we're the party that's going to protect our very democracy.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the things that energize people, that there's the most rich discussion on, that people have sort of the most policies that they want to put forward and center their campaigns around, they usually fall under one of these three banners.
Yeah,
makes sense. Those are the values that I'm sort of promoting right now. But I don't want to get in the middle of a primary process where it feels like I am setting floors or ceilings about, how ambitious or unambitious folks have to be about their vision and their policies as candidates for office.
Enormously wise.
That's sort of how I see it personally.
Yeah, I think that's wise.
Yeah.
I've described the difference now as between us and the other side as organized people versus organized money.
Mm-hmm. The many versus the money.
Yeah. And it's a real fight right now. Oh, my gosh, a real fight. Well, all right, we have a minute left. Remind everybody, although I think the listeners to this show know, how they can become part of helping you and WisDems do your great work.
Well, if you go to wisdems.org, you're able to find tons of ways to get involved with the party, whether that is volunteering, donating. We really appreciate folks who sign up to be recurring monthly contributors, 10, 25, 50, whatever you can afford. Long range certainty for politics when it comes to being able to plan a budget is so impactful. But we really appreciate it. If you happen to be listening or know somebody in Wisconsin, they can also join to be a member of your county party. It's a pay what you can model and help support us from the bottom up as well. Really appreciate anything you can do. We are also right now recruiting for the 1 year to win, but also for the spring election so people can get signed up for the long term. Anything you can do to support us here in Wisconsin, we'd really appreciate. What happens in Wisconsin can shape the country. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Devin. I really, really appreciate your time. Great conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and you know what comes next, your calls.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
All right, I want to hear from you, and while you're calling in, let me just... right before the show started, I saw there were two more instances of ICE gassing Chicago neighborhoods, and that was just as I went on the air. I don't know what's happened since then. In one of them, they gassed, a whole street in order to arrest one person. That's just uncalled for in any imagined scenario. In no case have protesters interfered with legal law enforcement activities of ICE. People have yelled for sure. They've documented what they've seen. They've alerted people, where ICE is. And they've asked ICE officials, to show their faces. But none of that stops them from doing their jobs. And I think there have now been 6 neighborhoods in Chicago that have been gassed, and people have been pulled out of cars. Federal courts have ordered ICE here not to gas protesters without warning, not to engage in this provocation, and they do it anyway. Border Chief Bovino was here himself. He was videoed throwing a tear gas canister himself. He's not a trained agent. He's an administrator who did this for video. He thought, for a fun video, I'm going to throw a tear gas canister in a Chicago neighborhood. This is terrorism at the hands of a federal government in an American city. And you know what? He did it because he thought that would make Donald Trump proud of him. Are you kidding me? Well, Tuesday, Judge Sarah Ellis has ordered Homeland Security to deliver Bovino to court Tuesday to answer for some of this. And let's hope that she is very tough. As tough as the people of Chicago are standing up for this every day for each other. Jim, what do you think? I don't hear you. Jim?
Yeah, you got to hit. Oh, there you are. Yep. Anyway, every call is a kid that this was the party, the Republican Party was the party of law and order. Well, they become that because if they get their way and they cut the food supply of half the country and the medical. Your ability to get any medical, this private army can subdue people very easily. They'll be so weak, they won't be able to even resist one officers, let alone 3 or 4 of them twisting the arms of a 15-year-old kid. And the other thing is, what kills me is, you think Trump would have made it into the White House if he was a Democrat? Do you think the Democrats would have supported Trump as a Democrat? What do you think, Edwin?
No, of course not.
Why not?
Because, let's start, even before we start with politics, let's start with values. Democrats actually, you know what? We read the same Bible that the folks on the other side do, but we read the part that says love your neighbor as yourself. They read something that says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Only they don't understand that that's meant to say vengeance belongs to God, not to them, right? They misread it.
Yeah.
So values, we begin with that. Yeah.
Joan had a nun on late yesterday, who supported and protected immigrants her whole life. She's dedicated, one of the nuns started dedicated, but we have a Supreme Court that apparently has no regard for immigrants. And when Kavanaugh says you're pigment of your skin, you can stop people because of the pigment of their skin. I mean, if that is, but the point is, when we do finally come to some kind of an insurrection here, the ICE is well equipped. They have drones, they have the guns, they have the money, they have the cars, they have the automobile. The nut that's running, it's got 2 huge airplanes. So if we did come down to fisticuffs, we're at a disadvantage. So we got to outwit them and outthink them. Anyway, Edwin, have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Dave, what do you think?
Hey, Edwin. That story where the Republicans and stuff are kind of making an issue about that U.S. Senate candidate from Maine, the Democrat Graham Plattner, after his candidacy revealed that the Marine Corps veteran possibly they're trying to say he's a Nazi sympathizer because he brought up about that tattoo, that skull and crossbone tattoo, that it resembles the Totenkopf on his chest that he had covered over. While on leave in Croatia in 2007 when he was in his 20s and drunk or heavy drinking when he had it done in the service. Now, when I was there were guys, they do stupid stuff like that, and you're impulsive like that, and then when you're young or you got a few buddies when they got tattoos or whatnot, and stuff they might regret later on. But, this skull and crossbones similarity, I would bet before this came up in the news, 90% of the people his age or younger wouldn't even know what it was.
No. And look, but he's also spoken about it, right? He said that's not, A, I didn't know that. B, I don't believe that. I'm appalled by that. It's not like the guys in the Republicans who we've caught in that group chat saying, let's dump them in the gas chambers and using, just the worst, most horrible language. So, you can people are not We don't have to pretend people are who they aren't. They tell us who they are. We know who Donald Trump is. We know who these people are. They're not faking it. They're proud to be who they are. And this guy says, look, that's not me. That's not who I am.
Right.
So
and
I don't think that's
Bernie endorses. Bernie and Hakeem Jeffries endorsed this man now, and kind of as usual, some of the Democrats with the circular firing squad. I mean, we got a young, maybe a young blood. He's apparently Maine likes him. They about 59% right now. He's up 30 points over his nearest one, and where's that countering on Pete Hegseth? He had the tattoos of the Jerusalem cross on his chest and
the difference is it's not the tattoos. Pete Hegseth says who he is. Pete Hegseth says, I'm sorry, if you're black, you cannot have an important job in the Defense Department. I'm sorry, if you're a woman, you do not belong defending America at all. I'm sorry, if you think as a soldier it's okay to read the story of Jackie Robinson, you're wrong. Pete Hegseth tells who he is. And, by the way, he tells, he doesn't just tell Americans who he is, he tells foreign adversaries where our troops are going to be in an open signal chat.
Right. But, Edwin, the tattoos he got have been linked to extremist groups. You know,
he is an extremist.
Right. In fact, he wasn't able to get serving on President Biden's security detail on Inauguration Day because one of the fellow soldiers seen that Deuce Volt on his arm.
Yeah, he is an extremist.
So I mean, who are they to point at this guy? And I hope more of the Democrats get behind him.
There's going to be a primary. There's going to be, they have a primary in Maine, and the governor of Maine, I think, is in that primary now. So they'll sort it out. I mean, that's what primaries are for. You know, we Democrats are a fractious lot. We don't always agree with each other. But then, it's two very similar people who are going to be on the same side, but they fight for the job. And so when the primary's done, they'll all come together. It's taken them a long time in New York, for sure, when the mayoral primary there. It's taken a long time for Hakeem Jeffries to make an endorsement. I wish Chuck Schumer would, but
this Mamdani is sitting there lighting their hair on fire, boy, the Republicans. But
he's been a very talented campaign.
Let me clear off, Edwin, and let somebody else.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. You bet.
Be well.
Yep. Okay, Paul, how are things on the West Coast?
Well, about the same. I missed you a couple of weeks ago. We were down in Portland visiting some friends listening to them play music, and I think everybody's heard my account of how many ICE vehicles we saw on the way. My partner, Elizabeth, is a bus driver for a company that hauls people for the tech companies, and she, for the last 2 months, has been saying that she's been seeing all these black, expensive, brand-new SUVs with in the area with no license plates or all blacked out windows. And so I said, well, let's see how many we can pick up on the way down to Portland. And by the time we got to the Columbia River down to Southwest Washington, there were dozens all over the road of these things. And so, Portland is just teeming with these temporary license or no license plates. But anyway,
because Portland's on fire. The whole city's burning down. That's what I heard from the president.
Oh yeah. It was, well, we went to see a folk music concert right in downtown. It was just, we had to cover our faces through the smoke to get to hear Peter, Paul, and Mary songs, It is always, as always, the quietest, sleepiest little town. It's quiet. It's just, the silence was deafening when we had a nice little Airbnb in the neighborhood behind the place where we were going to see the music. But, it's just total overkill in Portland. But I don't know. Following the discussion today, some of it's pretty depressing. But I have to ask: do you think? I would think such reckless governance as we're seeing now just has to come to some kind of a grand crash. Because I can think that even if Trump is still alive in 2028, I can't see him being healthy enough to govern. And, if the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire is any indication, cutthroat politics for succession of leader is what that led to, and that was why it ultimately fell. And, some other – I remember sitting in a class at Michigan State, and the professor was talking about how Henry VIII, the Pope threatened to excommunicate him, and that's why he had to kind of start this Church of England. I said, so what? What does he care if the Pope excommunicates him? So what? And my professor said, it's when he excommunicates the king, his whole kingdom is excommunicated, and he would be faced with a huge revolt. And I went, I didn't. And so I don't think that this kind of reckless governance can sustain itself in a country this big. Am I wrong, or am I just being idealistic? I don't know.
We've all pointed out that on top of the violations of law, on top of the violations of human rights, on top of the grift and criminality, they just can't govern. I mean, and the biggest example of that, there are many examples of that, but the one that's most obvious these days is putting Bobby Kennedy in charge of public health, right? We're now on our second or third measles outbreak since he's been there, they cannot govern. They cannot do the job and get it done. They're very good at tearing buildings down. We've seen that. They tear down the White House, but they're not,
that's what. I don't know if I sent you the link to a YouTube link to an address by David Brooks. I guess it was a couple of years ago, maybe, or maybe relatively recently. He was talking to, I think, a British audience. That the right wing has basically destroyed all of our traditions and institutions, and they're literally destroying an institution of the White House. They're just, collapsing it like that. And I can't see how that is sustainable. Something I want to talk about the court. Yeah, see if you can tell me who said this. John Roberts. John Roberts said in 1983, the generally accepted notion that the court can hear only about 150 cases a year gives the same sense of assurance as when the court adjourns in June for the summer and the Constitution is based for the summer. The court is only hearing about 60 merit cases a year. 60. He said 150. The court used to hear over 300 cases, and most of their time is taken up by adjudicating these shadow cases with Donald Trump's outrageous behavior.
Yeah, I know, and they're taking up the case of whether they can send the military into my city right now, and I don't have a lot of confidence in these guys.
Well, it's like, how could you? Like I've always said, if they find a constitutional way to say that's okay, I've always said the Constitution, as complex as law can be, it has to make intuitive sense, or the law is an ass, and that can't be true. It can't be something that I can justify this ridiculous thing that's clearly unconstitutional, clearly a violation of our principles of federalism, and yet they come up with a way to say it's okay.
They have done it several times, as you know.
I know. Well, I just can't see how sustainable that is.
It isn't. It isn't. And it certainly is not sustainable as a democracy. You can sustain a lot of things by force. And this is a government that wants to rule by coercion and force. And the biggest, most powerful non-governmental actors have folded and said, okay, well, we can do that. It works in other countries. We have their companies in Saudi Arabia who, even though it's an absolute monarchy, will do it. So look at the list of companies who are paying for his ballroom, who thought that was a good idea.
They're going to pay. They're going to pay him. We are going to pay for the ballroom. He's going to keep the money they gave him because he deserves it. And $230 million from the Justice Department. And I don't know if next week will we be at war with Venezuela next week? Trump has ordered by now 10 alleged drug boats destroyed, and has produced not one shred of evidence of any kind that any of them were anything other than fishing boats.
The only thing there are two possibilities for what those are: murder or war crimes. But those are the only two possibilities, right?
Well,
But of course, we could address this, but that genius Mike Johnson is like declaring another week of holiday because really Donald Trump is the Speaker of the House as well as he's the president.
Well, I thought isn't every day of Congress the same day, and now they're taking the same day off? This is kind of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off or something. It's like,
yeah,
but
it's not because they're getting paid.
And you heard that President of Colombia has filed complaints with the State Department and Justice Department. One of those boats that he blew up was a Colombian fishing boat under distress signal in Colombian waters. Yeah,
they are not. Look, the Republicans will not address this problem, and the Democrats will try and address this problem. But it's Americans who are going to address this problem, and we are. And it is not even a party issue. That's I told you I stood with people I know to be conservative Republicans about 10 feet away from like the Communist Party booth during the No Kings rally, because everybody in America, whether you're like 4 standard deviations to the left or 3 standard deviations to the right, they don't like what we're seeing, and like the Cato Institute has been who would have thought they're standing up and being, on the side of the rule of law and democracy these days. Okay, let's take them in the House.
The Republicans that I know here, in Trump's first term, a few Republicans in my book group, one was saying to the other, well, Bill, do you think there's going to be ever time we can ever vote again? I mean, these Republicans are not Trump Republicans.
Yeah, so, and we have to fight to protect the vote. And in no question, it is under attack. No question.
Yeah.
And it's not, but Americans are good at protecting the right to vote. We were going to do it. And he's going to do everything he can to stop it. But, you cannot stop 300 million people who rise up.
Right.
Thank you, Paul. Good to talk.
Have a good one.
Yep. Roosevelt, you're next.
President Double E, thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
Oh, I, like Paul, I want to know if I'm wrong, too. So this is what I cooked up in my head. It's going to sound real crazy. I think the ultimate plan is to attack Mexico. I'll tell you why. September, Rubio goes to Mexico. There's no details of what they talked about. There's generalities, supposedly about fentanyl and guns going from the United States to Mexico, and drugs. Of course, it's always drugs. Now, Colombia, in the 80s, drugs. In the 80s, happens to be a coincidence or not, is when Trump was visiting Epstein's island and doing the crazy stuff that he was doing. And I thought to myself, now let's see, if I'm Trump, what do I want? I want oil. So who would I attack first? Venezuela. The most oil, I believe, in the world, if I'm not mistaken, more than the Arabs, I believe. Second, what do I have next to me? Also, Mexico. Oil. I just bought off Argentina. I got a puppet down there, Milei. He's my puppet. He'll back me up. Okay? So why would I attack Venezuela and Colombia? Because they're all like Mexico, drugs. So I practice on them just like I practice on the cities like Chicago, L.A., where there's more Mexicans than anywhere else in the country of the United States. And I practice in those sanctuary cities. Remember what he said? He said that he was wanted to go into Mexico because of the fact of the cartels. These are his own words. Okay? Also, now let's see, where was I at? Now, of course, the fact of attacking Venezuela, it's a warning to Mexico. This could happen to you. Colombia, this could happen to you. Again, we don't know what the real reason Rubio went down there to Mexico to talk to the president. And I believe it's this, coming from a Mexican. I believe it's this. Trump, to him, everybody's a Mexican. To a lot of Anglo-Saxons, everybody's a Mexican. So he says, well, let me send this guy. He speaks her language. Let me tell him that, I want this from Mexico. That I haven't figured out. Other than oil, I haven't figured out. But I do make a visit to Mexico, meaning the United States, as far as Rubio, and give him a warning. And it's a whistle type of thing. He said a lot of things that he's always he has said a lot of things that he's come true, such as mass deportation. This we knew was coming. Who are being affected? Mexicans. Who's going back to Mexico self-deporting? Mexicans. Making it hard for the Mexican president to deal with everything else, just like a guy that works for the circus with 7 plates, balancing 7 plates. That's what's happening in Mexico. Now, there's been a caravan coming from South America again, Venezuelans. They're staying in Mexico. But their ultimate goal was to come to the United States. So who is he deporting now? TPS. The same TPS that Biden gave Venezuelans. He's deporting them too. And he's sending all these people to different parts of the world, different parts of the country. And to be specific, Mexico. He's deporting people to Mexico. There's a lot of Venezuelans now in Mexico. And Hondurans and all these other Central American people. So what do you think of my crazy, I hope you tell me I'm wrong, idea?
Yeah, you're wrong. He's I don't know what he's doing in Venezuela. He can't invade Venezuela. He cannot get away with invading Venezuela without Congress. He cannot. He can't. Even this Congress, even if this Congress doesn't want to stop him, he can't invade a country by himself. Just declare war by himself and invade a country. And if you're like, what's to stop him? Congress could. They won't. The Supreme Court probably would on that one because they want to be co-powers. But even if they didn't, Americans would. Americans are not going to go in. I mean, we just got through an entire generation of fighting in the Middle East that should never have happened. It happened because of George Bush. It happened because the Supreme Court didn't allow Florida votes to count in the 2000 election. Is why it happened. And so you had Bush instead of Gore, and this endless war. Americans are not eager to start it again in Latin America, in our own hemisphere. They just won't do it. It won't do it. And was he going to have a draft then? So he's going to force Americans to go to war down there, and then we have Vietnam all over again. It's not going to happen. No. He would love to get oil for sure, but the world is moving on from oil, and we're the last guys standing. So I don't think you're right.
No, Double E, I'm glad you said I don't think I'm right. Why don't I add on something I kept out? Let's not forget. He's trying to bring the price of beef down by buying beef from Argentina. This is what tells me that he wants to go. This is what tells me he wants to go to Mexico too.
He doesn't want to rule Mexico. He doesn't want to. He wants to rule a country that's all white. He doesn't. He's like, if you're South African and white, come on in, right? He doesn't want to have to. He believes everybody should stay in their own corner, like in this segregated world. That's his vision.
Well, I'm going to end it with this. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got plenty to worry about still. Yeah.
But to me, everything points to it. To me, but I know I cooked this up in my head, but
I'll leave it here, Roosevelt. Let's just watch it for a few weeks and see how we feel. I'm glad you raised it. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That I agree with. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah. All right, Steve, we got a couple minutes, and you can take us to the end.
All right, thank you. I had the feeling that Roosevelt would never stop talking, but I think you got me in. The earlier gentleman you had on talking about our institutions are already lost. Institutions are made up of people. And there's enough people in this country who are fed up with this crap. And I think we'll be okay. And this thing about Trump running again, he can't run again. It's against the Constitution. That would be grounds for going in there and removing him physically, don't you think? He can't run again. It's against the law, right?
Well, they've broken a lot of laws. I agree with you, by the way, and I don't think he would. I think he'd like to install whoever he wants after him. But again, we're in this place where we have to ask, who will stop him? Because, tearing down the White House like that without approvals against the law. Taking a private jet from the Qataris and having U.S. taxpayers fix it up so he can use it after he's out of office against the law. Having his son, Don Jr., make a fortune selling arms to the U.S. government against the law. The question is who's going to stop him, because it won't be any of federal law enforcement because they are in the tank.
Well, it'll be the people. People go to the streets or something.
I agree with you.
I hate to say it. If he runs again or tries to run or tries to make some weird rule, God forgive me, but parts of the CIA or military have to go in there and take him out. Take him out because he's a danger to himself and everybody in the country.
The American people. At the end of the day, it's on us, and I believe we are brave enough for this terribly dangerous moment. Yeah, we will be the new greatest generation. Right. Yeah, thank you all.
This is our opportunity to stand tall. This is our opportunity to stand tall and be great.
It is. Right. What everybody does today matters. You bet. Thank you.
That's right.
Listen, everybody. One of the reasons I'm optimistic, one of them, is what I see the people of Chicago doing in the face of the federal onslaught that is happening in this city. People are doing things like you wouldn't believe, not just to alert people when ICE shows up, not just to say to the ICE folks, take off your mask, tell us who you are, behave in a way that's legal. No one is saying that the worst are the worst. No one is trying to protect criminals. No one is saying that that the government cannot do what the government is legally allowed to do. But then again, why is the government throwing tear gas as they drive away from a neighborhood? Are you kidding me? And Chicagoans are fighting back, not violently, but peacefully fighting back. And they're supporting each other. They are going into community after community to help each other. In immigrant neighborhoods that are being economically, people in other neighborhoods are going there to support them and eat. And if you're listening from Chicago, there's great food in Little Village. I've been there a couple nights in a row. Head out there, go get some food. Fabulous, right? On the southeast side, same. There are a lot of places that are immigrant communities that need help. Get there. We're doing great stuff, and I'm going to see it not just in Chicago, but all over America. This city is that fascist's Waterloo. This is where they go and end. Thank you all. I'll talk to you next week.